Um, Firstly, I want to say that main two things is that if anyone is praying for anybody that they feel is never going to be free of an addiction or never going to be live in the normal world, so to speak, I want to encourage you to carry on praying, because my parents prayed for me when I was literally a total druggie, totally off the wall, and I came to know Jesus. That was the first thing. And the second thing, that seemed really important, is the fact that people that have got involved with drugs, often the people around them think it's a parental thing, or that they've grown up with the wrong, a lack of discipline or something like that. And I want to say that that is no way the case. And I know so many people that have had they've had a great background, but they've gone into drugs and drink and other lies of the enemy, really. So just want to say to any parents that feel like that, or any connections with other people that they love, that it's a person, an individual that chooses a way that they go, and they can go the wrong way. And if I can round it up, this is my story of how I went the wrong way, and that Jesus found me. I was brought up in a non-Christian home, totally anti-God, Christian home, non-Christian home. And it was everything so straight. In those days, it was a subculture. The drug scene was a subculture, whereas now it's sort of a wash, but then it wasn't. My brother went to Truro School. He got into drugs really young and was thrown out of Truro School. He was then went to boarding school, which he loved, but he was thrown out of boarding school in Devon for drugs. And I was like, oh, I'll never be like that. I'll never get into drugs. And at 19, I got married, just a normal person, nice person. And I carried on my life. I thought, is this it? You know, you grow up, you get married, you get engaged, you get married, then what? And I'm like, actually, this is really boring. And even though he's a nice person and everything, it wasn't what I imagined life would be like. So my brother went into prison for drugs, and when he came out, him and his girlfriend came to live with me and my husband that was then. And I remember he had a curtain in my house. It was all made of magic mushrooms that were drying on like little dangly strings. And I thought, I wonder what he gets out of that. But I forgot to say also, I was really anxious when I was little. But the word anxiety, it's almost a buzzword now, but it wasn't sort of known. But I had odd things, which I now know to be OCD. I had to check everything over and over again. And I had to wash my hands, they were bleeding. And so I was a bit of a screwed up person. Still am, really. But but my brother said to me, I was on diazepam for a stomach ulcer, which they used to give in those days for a stomach ulcer. It was downers, tranquilizers. So my brother came to live with us and said, oh, if you give me a couple of your tranquilizers, and I'll give you a bit of money. I'm like, well, why? And he said, well, if you double up or treble the dose, you will get off on it. You'll really enjoy it, be really nice. And I'm like, oh, okay. Of course I did. And then I'm like, well, what are you smoking? And he said, well, it's a bit of weed. Do you want to have a smoke? I said, remember, I'd never smoked a cigarette, nothing. So I was 19. And I said, yeah, I'll have a smoke, that sort of thing. And it was like, people say it's not the gateway drug, but in my view, and in that time, it was. And for me, it literally opened the door, and I was in there. And the devil was in there. And my brother said to me, do you want some acid, some LSD? So I said, yeah, I'll go for anything. And it was black stars. I remember those little black stars on blotting paper. Some of you guys at the back might remember what that was like. And it was, so I took this acid, and it totally changed me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I didn't know that if I died at that point, I would go straight to hell, like anyone who doesn't know Jesus. But I didn't know that. I'm like, this is amazing. And, hold on a minute, hold on. Joel, what's the next bit? Yeah, so I got more and more into drugs. I left my husband and I joined what was then called the Convoy, which was like a lot of people, homeless people, and different people looking for the truth, really. They were looking for some sort of truth, some sort of reality, some sort of other than the boring, humdrum, everyday life. That's what it seemed to me, anyway. Anyway, I joined this group of people with my brother, and I sold the house. We split the money between us, my husband that was then, and my brother and me. We split the money. So, of course, I had loads of money, which catapulted me straight into the dealing scene. And my brother said, I'll introduce you to all these different dealers. And I loved it, and I thought it was so cool, because there weren't many dealers that were women in those days. And so I loved it, and I loved the whole lot about it, weighing it, smoking it, selling it, the whole lot. So it went from there, and it went into speed. And at one point I had speed psychosis, which was really weird, but it didn't stop me. And then I was into downers. I was just taking loads of downers. It was just constant drugs, to the point where there was no normal relationship I had except with druggy people or alcoholic people. I didn't have any sort of, inverted commas, normal relationships. I still kept seeing my mum and dad, and again, they weren't Christians, they were great, and my mum would even say, "What's it like?" And I'd say, "Well, it's really weird, like you do this and you drop this and this happens," and she'd be like, "Wow, how strange." And they were really loving to me, even though I was so far away from what was the right, if you like, the normal. And then, yeah, I carried on, got more and more involved with the drugs, had lots of people that I was with. They were all dealers, so I didn't have to go and buy it in the end. By then I was into magic, witchcraft. I used to go to Stonehenge with the Convoy, and we used to go do everything up at Stonehenge. And my brother then went down to Exeter Prison for drug dealing again. So I sort of slithered into his place, for want of a better expression, selling the drugs down in Cornwall, mostly in Truro. And then I was involved with someone who was growing. We rented a house in Droitwich. We used to grow loads of weed, and I used to bring it down here, where I lived in a squat down here in Truro. We used to sell it from there. So me and Jeff would grow it. I would come down, sell it, go back up, and we got loads of money just funding it. But during that time, this is the good bit. During that time, I'm not taking too long. During that time, a friend of mine, I was then living as well with another guy when I was down here, which is horrible, but I was. And he was called Amir, and he was a heroin addict, but he was dealing his methadone. He was selling his methadone, and he sold it to a really good friend of mine who died. And I didn't know he was dead. So the police came round to my house and said, "We need you to come down to the station. Do you know where Mia something is?" And I said, "No, I don't know." He said, "Well, you come down to the station with us, please." So I went down there, and it was in the days where they had Instamatic little photographs with white edges, and they used to come out the bottom of this camera, and they threw this photograph of Kevin on the table. And I looked at the photograph, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, he's there, but the bit that was really Kevin is gone." I thought, where has he gone? Where is he? And I stared at this picture, and these police did what they had to do. You know, you did it, yes you did, no I didn't, all this sort of thing. And there was no actual evidence at all, which I knew, so I knew that they had nothing on me. So I went back to the house, and I contacted a chap that I was living with in Bristol. Not Bristol. I was backing down to Bristol, selling to Birmingham, Droitwich. And I said, "We've got to get out of here at the moment because it's getting a bit hot down here. Thingy's died, and it's a bit hot down here, so we need to get out of the area." So I went back up. What happened then? No, I didn't. I went back to my flat, and I thought, I wonder which way you go in your life. I wonder if there's a God outside myself, because I was into looking at other forms of energy, and I believed that when you die, you join the eternal energy blast. That's what I believed. And but my mum and dad had become Christians in their 50s, and they had started praying for me, and I didn't know that. But I went to my mum's baptism. That's it. I went in with a load of guys and went in there, and I stood up there and said, "What you all need is a tab of acid." I said, "Then you'll see the truth." And they're like, "Oh my goodness." And Mum was having her baptism, and she was like, "Hello, darling." She was absolutely thrilled with her baptism. And I'm like, "You're a nutter. You got into some weird cult." So I left. I never saw them again for months and months, but they continued to pray. And then the good, great, wonderful bit is, I was in my squat. I was going to go to sleep and then get up early, go on the coach to Birmingham, and meet Jeff and come and get the gear and bring it back. No, we were going to go abroad, get some more gear. That's it. Go bring it and come back. So, and I was in my room and I sort of said, if there's a God outside, then show me. I blew my candle out, got into bed, and I heard, it wasn't audible, but it was an impression. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I thought, that was weird. What was that? And it wasn't audible, but it was coming through me like, I am the way. And I'm like, who is? I didn't know what it was. And I tried to go to sleep, and I had this alternating blast of good and evil. I didn't know it was good and evil. The good was in pink, and the evil was in green. And it was just alternating back and forth. And I thought, what is going on? I wasn't even stoned that night, I don't think. I was just sort of straight, in a sense. And tried to go to sleep, and I couldn't. And this thing of good and evil, good and evil, good and evil. And I knew there was a choice. So I went down in the morning, and I said, all the lads were there, because I lived in the house, there was just guys there. And I said, I've had a really weird experience. And they're like, oh, Sarah, you've done so much acid, you've blown your... I said, no. I said, it's really weird. I said, it's like heaven and hell. And they said, you don't believe that, do you? And I'm like, no, I don't, but it's just really weird. Anyway, that day, as I was about to leave the flat, I said, right, if there's a God outside of me, outside of myself, then show me. I went up to Birmingham, missed my connection in Bristol by 3 minutes, which meant I had to wait 3 hours in the bus station cafe. Oh, it was wonderful. And I sat there, and I just saw this guy come in with a suit on, a very short guy with a suit. And in my world then, the only people that had suits and tattoos were people that were going to court. That was my mindset. If you wore a suit and you had tattoos, you were going to court. And that's all I was interested in, is wonder why he's in court, what's he, sort of thing. So he came towards me, he was full. And he came towards me, and he put his hand out, and I saw he had blocked out tattoos on both of his hands. And I'm like, wonder what he's into. And then I saw he had a Bible, and I thought, oh no, he's a nutter, he's a Bible basher. And like, he took his Bible, I said, no. And I swore at him, I said, I don't want to, what? No, I don't want to know. And he went, it's you. He said, Jesus has sent me to speak to you today. And I'm like, you bloody nutter. Sorry, you nutter. I don't want to know. But as he held this leaflet out, and the words on it said, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And you must be born again. And I knew in that moment that it was Jesus speaking to me. I'm like, oh my goodness, I heard that last night. He said, I know. He was smiling. He said, I know. God sent me to speak to you. He said, I was in the underpass in Bristol. I don't even know Bristol, the bear pit. He was under there. And he said, God sent to me to speak to you. And there was 3 hours, and in that 3 hours, everything I thought about eternity, he answered me from the Bible. And by the end of that time, I knew there was a hell, because I'd seen it, and I'd seen demons that showed me where they lived. They came from the pits of hell. But I just thought it was a forbidden realm that I'd had access to by taking drugs and going into witchcraft. But I now know that that was demonic. And he answered the questions of my heart through the Bible. And at the end of that time, I thought, I am a sinner. And he said, yeah, everybody is. He said, we're all born to go to hell. He said, but because of Jesus, he's taken the punishment for your sin and my sin, and he's nailed it to the cross, and he's died on the cross, and he's risen again. And I'm like, risen again? He said, yeah, he's alive, and he's speaking to you right now. And I knew it. And I thought, wow, it's blooming true. And he said, do you want to pray? And suddenly I realised I'm in the bus station. I'm like, no, I don't want to pray. Of course I don't want to pray. And he said, well, we meet again. So I agreed to meet again. I'm coming to the end now, John. We need to get it again. Went abroad, met up with Jeff, went abroad. But I found this little rubber lamb as I got on the coach. And I'm like, this guy said, read this through the window. And it said, Jesus, the Lamb of God. And I looked down, there's a little rubber on children's rubbers with a little lamb. I picked it up and it said, the Lamb of God. And I'm like, wow. Anyway, I got to Jeff's and said, this amazing thing that's happened. He goes, have a spliff, sit down, have a spliff, you'll be all right in a minute. I said, no, I don't know what it is, I don't know what God it is. I said, but I think it's Jesus. I think I've been saved. Bear in mind, I hadn't asked God to forgive me or anything. And so we went abroad, we brought a load of gear back, came back to Truro, dropped it off, but I couldn't sell it. My heart, I was convicted. I laid it on someone to sell for me, and I went down to the cellar bar, it was in Truro then, and I said, guess what? And they're like, what? You've got the gear, haven't you? I said, no, I haven't. I said, I think I've come to know Jesus. And they all went, oh, no. And I said, yeah, I think this is all true. I think the Bible is true, and it's supernatural, and it's everything I've ever wanted to find. And there's a hell, and I'm going there if I don't do this thing. They're like, what have you got to do then? I said, I don't really know. Anyway, again, tried to sell the gear, didn't sell the gear, laid it on another guy. He sold it, took the money, went back up. And when I stopped in Bristol, and by then we were staying with some Rastas in St. Paul's, Rastafarians, stayed there, and I went to this little church in Bristol. There were 7 people there, that's all. And they were all real penties, and they had the old gadangers, what do you call them? Tambourines, yeah. It was great. But I went in there, and I thought, oh, no, this is really weird in there. They're all really weird. And they're all hands in the air, and I'm like, oh, my goodness, this is not for me. And I was about to go out, and the guy that was there, who took me in the church, said, Sarah, just sit here for a minute. Just sit here for a minute, and then you can go. I was okay. Anyway, they were praying, and they said about Jesus, said the whole thing again. They said, anyone? Remember, I was totally addicted by then. I was totally addicted to speed. I was totally addicted to weed. People say you can't be addicted to it. I was addicted to weed, 120%. I couldn't speak without it, believe it or not. I couldn't speak without it. I was sick. I couldn't have it. I was a complete state because it gave me the peace I must have been looking for, I thought. But it's a false peace, and the Bible says there is a peace that the world gives, but it's not as the world gives. Jesus gives you real peace in your heart forever. And so I prayed, and this person said, pray this. And so I prayed, Jesus, please forgive me. Please come into my heart. Thank you for dying for me. I know I'm a sinner. I give my heart to you, and I want to be born again. And I didn't know fully what that meant, but as I looked up, it was like chains falling off, and I'm like, wow, what is going? It was higher than any trip. It was higher than any high. And that's not in an irreverent way. It was absolutely amazing. And I had total joy. Absolutely, like Ken was saying, ecstasy. It was amazing. Not the actual pill, but it was absolutely amazing. And Ken this morning came up to me, she said, you've been born again. I said, I know. I'm saved. And I went back to these Rasta's house, and we danced all night. And it was fantastic. And I'm rounding it up now, Dan. So, and then everyone I knew, of course, were into drugs. And I lived in a place, and somebody brought my wonderful husband round. And so it was an accountant with a hippie. And they said, this guy, he's into Jesus as well, you know. I'm like, is he? I don't think he's my type. He's really straight. He's wearing a suit. He's carrying a briefcase. No, thanks. And then, but it was so great. And we studied the Bible together. And I realised, oh, this man loves Jesus like I do. And before we were going to be married, the Bible, I said, is it right, Lord? As I'm sure Mark was saying, is it right, Lord? Is it right that I marry this person? And I read the words, he has brought you together for godly seed. And I can say now that godly seed, one is here, and my other 2 boys are saved also. They know Jesus. They've all been into drugs, but they all know him as their saviour, and they're now working for Jesus. And so I thank you. Thank you for listening to me going on and on. But it's so amazing. Don't miss it. If you do miss it, you're lost forever in hell. Don't go there. Make a commitment to Jesus. Ask him to forgive you, and he will set you free. He sets you free completely. And thank you for listening to me.